Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome, it is episode 111 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. And my name is Catherine Erdley. I'm your host as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. The Resilient Retail Club is my membership group for product businesses. Find out more about the membership and my consultancy at resilientretailclub.com. And if you use the code 10podcast, that's 10podcast, you can get £10 off your first month in the membership. Today, I am joined on the podcast by Rosie Greener, who is a club member and also the founder of the fabulous jewellery brand Good Daze. That's D-A-Z-E. Go check them out. I absolutely love Rosie's jewellery. And I had a fabulous time talking to her all about her story about starting the brand, as well as a cautionary tale about the importance of trademarking your name. Hi, Rosie. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Catherine. How are you?
I'm very well. Do you want to start us off by introducing yourself and telling us more about Good Daze?
Yes, of course. So my name's Rosie and I have a jewellery brand called Good Daze, formerly called Mood Good. And I started it back in 2017. And I basically design happy, uplifting jewellery, which is then made in small workshops around London. I recently went it's not so much recently actually now. It's last November I went full time with it. That's basically it in a nutshell.
And it's very lovely. And I am a customer, I should say that. I have a couple of your pieces and they are very cheerful and I do enjoy them.
You.
And I'd love to know a little bit more because actually we have not a completely dissimilar background. We both come from more corporate retail. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about sort of how you got started and what your background was before you started the business?
Yes, absolutely. So I graduated back in 2015 from a jewellery design degree, and I went straight into the commercial, mass-produced side of the industry. And I actually started with designing for Topshop. It was an incredible opportunity because, I had this assumption that I would be kind of making cups of tea for, a year or two before I'd actually get to design anything. But it just so happened that when I joined the team, they were sort of, quite understaffed and overworked and just really needed an extra pair of hands, basically. So it was incredible. I sort of immediately was designing stuff that would actually be in store.
Wow.
And, I was kind of working with all the different departments, which was really, really eye-opening. And I loved it. It was incredibly fast-paced, as you'll know, Catherine.
Yes.
It was a really intense environment, but having just got out of uni, it was everything that I wanted, really. And I think ultimately I really wanted to design jewellery that I would actually wear or my friends would wear.
Yeah.
It didn't really appeal to me to design things that kind of cost thousands and millions of pounds and would just sort of sit in a cabinet. I really wanted to design things that people would actually enjoy. So yeah, I was there for about 4 years and I really just learned everything about that side of the industry. I was designing for Topman as well at sometimes and other brands, Matalan. And
so just to be clear, you weren't actually in-house at Topshop, you were in one of the big...
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, a lot of the jewellery that's in high street stores is designed by third party, if you like.
It's like a concession company.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was an overriding company that designed for a lot of the high street shops and a lot of online shops as well. Yeah, so there were multiple brands. It was, a really, really big company. And, it was great because you had the opportunity to kind of move around onto different brands. And it was a really, kind of thrown in the deep end, just an absolute rundown of everything about a big business. And I got an opportunity to go to China and to visit the factories there.
Oh, wow.
Which was, really, really interesting. I loved it. At that point in my life, it was exactly what I wanted. It was fast paced. It was exciting. I got to be creative. I got to be around other creative people. I got to learn so much because, you were a merchandiser, weren't you, Catherine?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I got to learn, from other merchandisers. I got to learn from, buyers, and you'd work with like the marketing team, the visual merchandising. You'd really just get a glimpse of every aspect of business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, when I look back at that time, I think like, wow, I really did pick up a lot of skills that I do use in my business today.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really interesting because I think unless you've been in a corporate or commercial retail environment, so I worked in clothing for a really long time, and the designers there, it's funny because we often think about like, so fashion designer, a lot of people, that's kind of like a real dream role, right? And it is very exciting and to see things come to life. But at the same time, the volume, so the number of designs that you must have been creating, I'm sure it's like you say, it's very fast paced. And I remember talking to people and they'd be like, oh, I've got to design, 40 dresses in the next couple of weeks type thing, or just the number of designs you have to come up with, almost like the output of your creativity has to be enormous, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that was probably what inspired me to kind of start doing my own thing, really, because it was incredibly, the pace was, it was just insane. You were sort of churning out designs, which at times it was like incredibly thrilling, to just be on that kind of creative high of actually just producing, designing. And, at times that was the dream. But I think it does get to a point where you do crave like a slower and more thoughtful design process.
Yes.
And another aspect, which I'm sure, again, you will know a lot about, Catherine, is that the designs, and the design you start with is rarely the design that ends up.
Yes. The reverse engineering. They say, no, it's got to cost, £2. So take that off. So you put all these things on, and then it was like, no, take that off. And then it's like what you end up with is kind of often a watered down version of the vision, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Quite often it would be, especially as time went on and, costs went up and everything would have to just be stripped down, and it would be, kind of a shell of what you'd imagined it to be by the time it got in the shop. And not all the time, obviously you would get used to creating something that was in price and everything like that, but it wasn't the creative freedom that I imagined it to be. And I think as time went on, I sort of just craved being able to have more control over what the end product looked like and the quality of it, and how much time went into the design and whether I was happy with it, because ultimately I wasn't the one signing off the end product.
Right.
Even if I wasn't happy with it, I would obviously get some sort of a say, but ultimately it wasn't down to me. So I just craved having that, I guess, control, which makes me sound like a bit of a control freak, which I probably am a bit, but I just really wanted to have that control over the whole process.
It's absolutely true. The design is, you create it, you put it out there, but ultimately it's often the buyers making the final decision on the product and whether or not they think it's commercial. And you might think, well, this isn't what I had in mind, but if the buyer thinks it's going to sell, then it's going on the shop floor. So so that was kind of the driving force then. So your own creativity, a slower process, more considered, higher quality. For a long time you did run the business part-time. You said you started in 2017 and you just recently last year went to being full-time. So how did you find that process of running the business at the same time as having a day job?
Yeah, so it was about 4.5 years that I was running the business alongside a full-time job. And then I went down to 4 days when I moved to another company. And it was incredibly, incredibly intense. I think that's the word I would use, particularly in the past couple of years when, obviously there was the pandemic, which was a real catalyst for my business. And it really grew in that time. And everything just got, there was more orders, there was more marketing required, there was more engagement, there was more of everything.
Yeah.
Handling that alongside having a job was incredibly intense. I mean, it helped that, for large periods of time, I couldn't leave the house and have a social life, even if I wanted to. But basically, my life was just work in that period. And it was just something that I guess I just accepted that I had to do that. I had to get through that bit to be able to get out the other end. And it was the end of last year that I managed to go full time with the business. But last year in particular, it was at points, it was really, really tough. It was a lot of late nights, a lot of, missing plans with friends and letting people down and being, quite exhausted all the time and constantly feeling worried about letting something, dropping a ball or letting something go wrong or things like that. Yeah, it was incredibly intense. I wouldn't want to do it again. Let's just put it that way.
Do you think there were any positives to having that full-time income while you were building the business?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as I'm an extremely risk-averse person, and I think I would have been worried about going full-time with the business without having some sort of financial buffer anyway.
Yeah.
But I think, the unpredictability of the pandemic, and there were just so many factors that felt unpredictable, and having another income that I knew I could rely on and I could get some savings together.
Yeah.
Having that kind of financial buffer was a massive weight off my shoulders. I just think, when you're worrying about how much money you're going to make from your business constantly, it does make everything harder. It makes it harder to be creative. It makes it harder to take risks and to enjoy it. And I just think it's so important to wherever you can to try and take away that pressure, that added pressure. And, also I was so hungry for it. I was so hungry to be full time with my business, and knowing that I've worked that hard for it and that I've put that much into it, it's made me not only appreciate it, but also really want to fight for it and want to make it work. And I'm not sure that I would have had that if it had been easier.
I mean, I'm a big believer in letting these things take time, because as I said, I think we almost sort of romanticize this idea of supporting yourself from your business, which of course is a fantastic feeling, but equally so, it isn't the reality for a lot of people, especially when you first start out. I think the more that we can talk about these different ways of doing it and not almost say you've got to just quit your job right away, but you can build the two up side by side. I think it's important that people know that it's not a failure. It's a very sensible decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think another very important factor is that I wasn't making nearly enough money from my business for the first, 3 years, probably. It just wasn't an option to support myself from the business. And there's maybe a glamorized view of how that works and how that happens. But the reality is that I think most businesses don't make that much profit, for at least a couple of years. And even if you are making profit, you're really, the inclination is to put that money back in and to invest back in, equipment and things that will make your life easier and the business better. And I think having the freedom to be able to do that is really valuable, because when I started the business, I was, an assistant designer. I was on a very low wage. I had to do everything I had to be quite thrifty about things. For example, when I would do a photo shoot, I didn't have a good camera. So I would go to Calumet, the camera shop, before work and rent out a camera. And then, I would have it over the weekend and pay £30 or whatever, do hundreds and hundreds of shots in that weekend just to get my money's worth. And then I would go to, the shop before work on the Monday morning and I'd return it again. And it finally got to the point where I could actually invest in a camera, which was amazing because it meant I could take pictures at any time and I didn't have to do this mad dash to the camera shop before going to work. And, that was a real investment back in the business. But, at the time, that was £600. That was so much money.
Yeah.
But it was really important that I was able to invest that back in rather than have to take that money out to live on, because that, that enabled me to then continue the business and grow it and make my life more efficient.
Absolutely. So you started it, you were working alongside your full-time job. You eventually got to the point then last year where you went full-time. And then this year, so very recently, you've had the big rebrand. So do you want to tell us some more about the rebrand, why that happened, and maybe some of the reasons behind it that people may not know about?
So my brand was originally called Mood Good until about a month or two ago. And I back in 2019, I first tried to trademark the name. I had a TM7A filed against the trademark application, which is basically a threatened notice of opposition. So it basically meant that another brand, felt that the name was too similar to their trademark and they were threatening to oppose it. So at the time, I was still working full time and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what my options were. So I basically just withdrew the trademark because I didn't know what else to do. And then, as we've said, last year, I went full time with the business and it was kind of like, right, this is crunch time, like things are getting serious. I need to protect myself, protect my business. And one of the things that was really hanging over me was the fact that I hadn't been able to trademark my name. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and find a lawyer and I'm going to trademark it again, but this time have a lawyer on board so that I can at least know what is going on, what everything means, and how I can move forward. So I got a lawyer involved. We filed the trademark again, and again the same thing happened from the same company. And this time, because I had the lawyer on board, I was able to sort of get a bit more information about next steps and how I could move forward. And we sort of entered a negotiation basically with the company's lawyers, and it didn't really go very far, to be honest, because it was quite obvious from the start that they were quite rigid in their position and they weren't going to move on it. My options were sort of, do I pursue this? Do I go to court? Do I have however much in legal fees and potentially be able to come out and keep the name? But at the same time, there was always the risk that I could go down that avenue, spend a lot of money, go through all the stress of that, and then not be able to, not win it essentially and not be able to have the name anyway. So it was a really hard decision to make. But ultimately, I just thought, you know what, I've just left full-time employment. I'm so looking forward to like a drama-free life and
yes.
not having all of these, stresses that come with having a job and all of these other things. And, I just don't want that stress in my life, basically. And also the unknown legal fees as well, obviously, is absolutely terrifying. So I basically came to the decision to once again withdraw the trademark. And that left me in a situation where I could keep using the name with it being not trademarked. There was a small chance that the company would, come after me for doing that. I wasn't sure whether that would happen. I was told that probably not, but it was always a risk.
Right.
Or I could, rename to something that could be trademarked. And obviously that would come with a whole load of new issues, but at least the end goal might be that I'd have a trademarked name. And after a lot of consideration, there was a lot of back and forth, and it was a really, really, really hard decision because I was making it completely on my own. I could speak to friends, I could speak to family, I could speak to my partner about it, but ultimately no one knows your business and no one cares about your business as much as you do. So really it was, I was very aware that it was very much my decision. And it was a lot of pressure because it was a bit of a lose-lose situation, really. Either way, it wasn't ideal. And it was just sort of going with whatever I thought. It was like trying to look into a crystal ball and think what's going to be the best decision for the future of the business. But ultimately, I did decide to change the name. And so I've been going through a rebrand for the last couple of months and I'm out the other side of it. I've survived it and it's been okay. It was an incredibly stressful time and it ended up being quite a positive thing because, I'm really happy with the new name. I'm happy with the new branding, and I ultimately decided to sort of take all of my followers and my customers and everyone on that journey with me.
Yeah, for sure.
I was really open about the situation and what had happened. And I was really keen to share the process, really, because I sort of, my instinct went to, which I think a lot of small business owners do, your instinct sort of goes to, well, how would a big business deal with this? And they would sort of do like a, behind the scenes rebrand, and then they would do like a big reveal. And initially that was how I was going to do it. But then I sort of thought, actually, wouldn't it be more engaging, more interesting, more personal if I actually get my audience involved and get their opinions on things and bring them along for the journey? Because a lot of them have known the brand, for years, and they almost know the brand as well as I do. So having their point of view on everything and having them involved really is like invaluable. You don't get that the first time that you do your branding when you start. So it just seemed like an opportunity that was, too good to miss, really.
And do you think it's important to talk about you said, like the highs and lows, and because it's just not something that a lot of people are aware of, this whole trademarking, because you can start the business. Now, is it a limited company? Or yes. So you can set up a limited company, and the rules around the naming for that are much looser, I think, than the trademark, right? So as long as it's not completely the same as another business, as long as it's available through Companies House, you can come up with a name. Yeah. But then a lot of people don't realise that if you want to use this trademark, now I'm not going to try and attempt to get into all of the ins and outs because I'm by no means an expert on this. But, effectively, like you say, the actual name of the business, or the phrase mood good, or I suppose it's the association with mood good and jewellery, right? Yes. This is kind of what you're protecting. And that you do need that, just because if somebody else started using it, and they could then theoretically say to you, even if they started after you, but they trademarked the term, they can say to you, well, this is too close to my trademark, go buzz off. And you have no choice but to comply. So the best, I suppose, the best situation would have been if you'd known at the very beginning to trademark mood good, but then would you have even have thought of that?
Well, I mean, I didn't. It was only 2 years in that I came to the conclusion that I probably should trademark it.
I think it's the same, because when you start a business, it's literally almost like the last thing you're thinking about.
And I think as well, it was a different time. I think now there's a lot more information out there, like your brilliant podcast and other people's podcasts. And I think back then it was, there was a lot less available information. So I think now if I was starting, it might be slightly different. But back then it was, I just had, I had no concept. I mean, obviously before using the name, I had checked on Companies House. There wasn't anyone using it. I sort of Googled, I knew there wasn't anyone using it. I mean, I didn't know anything beyond that. I mean, to be honest, I might have even checked the trademark, and mood good wasn't trademarked, but obviously I didn't know, even now, I mean, it's all very much a grey area of how close can a name be for it to be, infringing and all of these things. So I would recommend to anyone just to get your name trademarked ASAP. Like if you can do it before even launching your brand, like that's obviously the optimum, situation, because then you can change it if you have any issues. It does take a couple of months, 2 or 3 months for it to be processed, so make sure you're leaving a lot of time. But I mean, I had no idea that was something that I needed to do. And even now it's like, I'm glad with the decision that I've made and I feel protected, but ultimately, maybe I could have just bumbled on and used that name and nothing bad would have happened.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's just a risk. It's always a risk. Yeah. And you just never know what's around the corner. And I think that obviously it's, good to be positive, but I think it's also good to be prepared and to protect yourself where you can.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So just finally then, I'd love to, I think it's a fascinating topic and I feel like we could talk about it all day, but I'd love to talk about something maybe a little bit more cheery. One of the ways that you've really made your mark, or one of the things that you do in your business, and I think you do particularly well, is that you've got several successful collaborations under your belts. and I've certainly bought from your collaboration collections before. So do you want to tell us a little bit more? Because I know that it's something that I'm always talking to people about, collaborating. I think it's such a brilliant way to grow your audience. But I know that sometimes people say to me, well, where do I even start? So what I suppose are your top tips for collaborating with people when it comes to your business?
Yeah, so I absolutely love collaborating with other creatives. I think one of the few things I miss about working in an office and on a team is kind of having other creatives around to like back and forth with and to bounce ideas off. And I just think when you collaborate with other businesses or other creatives, you can just create something that is like really unique and is unlike anything else that you've created previously. So there's so much excitement that comes along with it. And I would say to anyone that kind of is thinking that they might want to collaborate, I would say the first step is just to surround yourself with creatives that you admire and people whose work you like, and just to create quite, I mean, I'm going to say authentic. I know it's an overused word, but create authentic connections and, don't go into those relationships thinking, I want to, I'm gearing towards the collaboration. Just go into those relationships thinking this person's got really cool, a really cool aesthetic or a really cool style. And I just want to, I want to be around them. I want to tell them that I love their work. I want to chat to them, and you just never know where that will lead. And I think if you just surround yourself with those people, then things like collaborations can happen quite naturally.
That's such a good point. And I think that is so overlooked as part of the process, that it's like, surround yourself with the people you want to collaborate with. Great first step.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just surround yourself with, if you like someone's work on Instagram or, on TikTok or whatever, like tell them, I always think that that's so important. If you think someone's doing something really cool, to tell them and to engage with them. And, if they reciprocate that, that's quite a good indication that they also think that what you're doing is quite cool. And, some of the people that I've collaborated with, I've been in contact with for years before anything comes around. And I think the second thing is, even if you sort of know that you would really want to collaborate with someone, I think you have to wait until the right timing and the right idea. Because sometimes, like, even if your brands are aligned and your audiences are aligned, it doesn't necessarily mean that the concept is there yet. And like the perfect example of this actually is Emily from Limpet Store. So we've been in touch for, many years. We'd sort of crossed paths at markets and at pop-ups. And, she's just such a lovely girl. We got on really well. I'd always thought her work was incredible, and our audiences are extremely similar. And we'd always sort of said like, conceptually, it'd be really fun to do something together. But the idea just hadn't sort of like come to fruition yet. And then in 2020, I got a dog, and I just was absolutely obsessed with my dog. And I just thought, how cool would it be if I had a piece of jewellery with my dog's face on it? And then that kind of got the ball rolling. And I was like, oh, maybe I could make jewellery that has people's pets' face on it. Like, that would be really, really cool. And the kind of the missing piece of the puzzle is that I wouldn't say drawing is like my strongest point. And I didn't feel that comfortable having to do portraits of people's pets. So the whole, everything else, creating the jewelry, the marketing, the photography, everything else, I was like, I can handle that, but I can't really draw a pet.
Right.
So I was, that got me thinking, who can I get involved? And, as soon as Emily came into my head, I was like, that would be incredible, because her style of drawing is really cool. She draws a lot of animals anyway. I know that she's like a massive animal lover, and like so are her audience. So yeah, so I already had this, connection with her. I already got along really well with her. So I think I sent her like a voice note at about 10 o'clock on a Saturday, and, in the evening, and was like, I know this is outside of work hours. Like, I'm sorry that I'm talking about business, but I've just had this idea that I think is just so much fun. And, would you want to be involved? And she voice noted me back a little bit drunk. She'd had a few wines, and she was like, absolutely, that sounds incredible. So yeah, so it just came about in a really positive and exciting and genuine way. And, it went down a storm. Like, everyone loved them. They sold really well. and they're still available on the website. Like, they're just something that I've really enjoyed doing, and I know that she has as well. And I think all of that excitement just ends up creating something that's really special.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, totally. What a lovely idea. And as you said, it wasn't like you weren't trying to force it. It was just sort of there in the back of your mind, but the relationship was ready to go, so that when you did come up with the idea, it was there rather than trying to manufacture it almost.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that is so important because, you know, if you approach someone completely cold and say, you know, do you want to collaborate? There's no background there. There's no emotion. There's no excitement to kind of build on. And I think just building those connections and then letting them kind of flourish when the time is right and the idea is right is just naturally going to lead to much better things. And you do have to be really patient. You know, I've got a collaboration coming out next month, which I'm extremely excited about. And that is something that has been, you know, on my radar, in the back of my mind for, I mean, to be honest, before I even started the brand. Like, this is my dream collaboration, and it's just something that I'm so excited about. And
I can't wait to see it.
You know, that's something that it's taken years and years to kind of cultivate that relationship and for it to be the right time and all of those things. But it's so worth it because it's, you know, if you want to get something amazing out of it in the end, but, you know, for both parties, for the customer, for everyone involved, then I just think that is just the best way to go about it, being completely authentic and authentically excited, I think, and just kind of running with that.
Well, fantastic. Well, I can't wait to see it. Do you want to tell everyone where they can find out more about Good Daze?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Instagram is Good Daze Jewellery, and it's Daze, D-A-Z-E, and the website is gooddazeahead.com.
Love it. And good days are ahead, so keeping your eyes peeled for your exciting collaboration.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to know what you thought of today's episode. Do you have your business name trademarked? Have you thought about that before? Why not come over to Resilient Retail Club on Instagram and tell me what you thought about it? If you have a moment, then it absolutely means the world to me if you rate and review the podcast in iTunes. You can both rate it as well as write a review, and I'm very, very appreciative to everyone who does so. I read all of them personally, and it absolutely makes my day. And if you are in Spotify, you can rate the podcast in the app. Otherwise, if you hit follow or subscribe, you'll be the first to know about each new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.